Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuckway Pines, and today we are down in the preservation station for the long-awaited sauerkraut video. Today I'm going to take this nice big head of cabbage and turn it into some delicious sauerkraut. Stay tuned and find out how. Before we dive into making sauerkraut, I'd like to talk about some of the supplies that you might need in order to make this successfully. So, first steps first is obviously your cabbage. We will clean this up a little bit. I'm going to take some of these outer leaves off and we'll work with the main head of it. But a big tool that I like to use when I make cabbage is a food processor. This one is Sunbeam. It's a older model, but it has the slicing attachment. I can even show you guys real quick. This side's the grater side, and then this side's the slicing side. I'm going to use the slicing side. I've done the grated side before. It just makes it very fine. So if you like your sauerkraut very fine, go ahead and use that. Doesn't mess up the process at all or anything like that. If you don't have a food processor, you can obviously slice it up by hand. It just takes a little longer, a little time consuming, but that way you can cut it to your preferred size if you like to, if you have any preference there. So food processor makes it go by a lot faster. And then you're going to want some salt. You want good quality salt though. You don't want anything that is iodine or that's been iodized or has iodine in it. Anything that's been treated, anything like that, because those chemicals could hinder your sauerkraut making process. This salt I'm going to be using is a Redmond real salt. You can use this, you can use a sea salt, the canning salt, or a pickling salt. Works just as well too. We will need a little kitchen weight. That way we know how heavy our head of cabbage is, because that'll also determine how much salt we will need to use. So stay tuned for that. I'll get more into detail with that. A cutting board and a knife, of course, just to trim off the stem, or if you don't have a food processor, definitely comes in handy. I have a sauerkraut masher. It just helps mash the leaves and stuff like that after we're done chopping it or slicing it and all that stuff. You don't have to go out and buy one of these. You could use maybe the butt end of a rolling pin or maybe like a tough ladle or something, you know, get a little creative in the kitchen. I'm sure there's a utensil that can make up for the function of this guy. So if you don't have one of these and you don't have to go out and buy one, you can always use something else around the house. So could even use like an old baseball bat or something, just wrap it up with like plastic bag and beat up your kraut with it. I don't know, get creative. And then we're gonna need a fermentation vessel, because this, in order to make sauerkraut, to make that cabbage, get that sour flavor, it's gonna have to undergo a fermentation process. Typically you don't wanna use anything that's metal or anything that is plastic, especially not food grade. I actually have a couple options. I have a very large mason jar. This is about a gallon, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 1 gallon. And it's nice, it's glass, so it's perfect. You know, nothing's gonna seep in, nothing's gonna seep out or anything like that. So I might use this. It's always a nice option, depending on how big your batch is. And then I also have a crock. This is your more traditional standard option. Upstairs we currently have a large batch of sauerkraut going. It's in a 4-gallon crock, so that's actually brewing up real nicely. But this is an insert for an old crock pot that we had, and the heating part, the outer part, kind of went out on us. So I just kept the inner part, the insert, and it's, you know, ceramic or what have you, so it'll make a nice vessel for sauerkraut or any sort of fermentation like that. So I might use this for that, depending on how full it gets. And if I have to, I can divide it up amongst the 2 vessels that I have. Okay, so that's pretty much it for our supplies. I do have a large plastic bowl because for my food processor, I have a chute here, and that way I can catch all my cabbage. Otherwise, it's just gonna make a mess. So, but first step is first. It's to clean off your outer leaves. Just rip out any outer leaves and stuff. I'm gonna just throw them in this bag for my compost. But you just want to rip your leaves down, or rip the leaves off to get to the main head where it's all nice and tight. All these outer leaves can go. You could keep, if you have a few that are somewhat decent, keep those off to the side because we might need to use them for the end. Because when everything's all said and done in your vessel, you want to have all your little sauerkraut bits and pieces under the brine that's going to be made, because if anything is exposed to air, it could most likely lead to molding, and once your ferment starts to mold, it is no longer good, and we definitely don't want that. So yeah, if you have any nice outer leaves, keep those in hand, and if you don't, I'm gonna show you some other options to help keep your stuff submerged under that brine. But I'm just gonna keep peeling kind of these nastier looking leaves. We're pretty much at the head of the cabbage, but some of these surface leaves are not the prettiest, and I kind of don't want to turn that into cabbage or sauerkraut. So I'm just gonna kind of clean it up a little bit. Just a little bit. Okay, maybe I'll do one more layer here. Okay, that looks a lot better to me. So, got a nice head of cabbage. I'm just gonna take these, put this in my compost bag. Now I'm gonna cut the stem off here. Rattly. Now I'm gonna weigh my headed cabbage. Now the reason why we want to know the weight is to know how much salt we need to use. And typically, depending on where you read, you'll probably find a little bit of different variations. But what I like to use, standard rule of thumb, is a tablespoon of salt per pound. So we're going to find out here how heavy this guy is. I'm going to guess maybe 5 pounds, a little over 5 pounds. See, I don't want them to roll off. It's a little shy, I'll show you guys, but it's 4 pounds, 12 ounces. Okay, so that tells me with it being 4 pounds and 12 ounces, I'm going to need to add about 4 tablespoons of salt. Now we're going to do that gradually as I'm shredding, so it's going to be kind of working in waves here. So turn my weight or my scale off, put that off to the side. Now this is the noisy part. We're going to start shredding, and I'm just going to cut everything into little chunks and sections. And I'm going to have it sliced right into this bowl. So I'm just going to go ahead, cut my head of cabbage in half into more manageable sizes. It's a pretty dense cabbage, honestly. You can see all the nice layers to it, nice tight leaves. So nice and dense for sure. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of just cut it into little sections here, into more manageable pieces. That way my food processor can handle it. And once you get to like the core, you can kind of work your way around that and like obviously try to get as much cabbage leaf as you can, but if you have to get out the core here, do so. But okay, so bear with me, I'm gonna start slicing and it's gonna get a little noisy. Okay, so I have about half of my cabbage sliced and shredded up really nicely, actually. I like the size, so that slicing feature works perfectly for this. Now, what I'm going to do is slowly sprinkle this into my fermentation vessel, and then I'm going to gradually add about 2 tablespoons of salt, because this is half, about 2, maybe 2.5, and then just sprinkle it over my cabbage. So let me grab a measuring spoon. We need a tablespoon. Okay. So I'm going to use this big crock, and I'm just going to kind of put some in here. And then I'm going to take 1 tablespoon and just kind of gradually sprinkle it over. And then maybe if you want to just kind of massage that in, stir it in a little bit. The reason why we're doing it like this is because the salt will naturally pull out the liquids that is inside the cabbage leaf. And that will create the brine for it to ferment in, thus creating the sauerkraut taste. So I'm going to put the rest in here, and I'm going to sprinkle another tablespoon, maybe a dash extra. Do just a little dash, nothing crazy. And then I'm going to mix that in as well. Just kind of fluff it in here. Now this crock currently is pretty full. Like, I don't know if I'd go ahead and add any more. But if I sit and if I let this sit for about 10-20 minutes, let the salt work its magic, you know, let it do a lot of the work for me, the leaves and the, you know, the little bits will shrivel down a little bit, and it'll create a little bit more room. And that's what I'm going to do right now, is I'm just going to let this sit here, well, off to the side here, and let the salt kind of work its magic. I'm going to continue slicing up the rest of my cabbage while that's breaking down, and then we will go on to the next step, okay? So I will be right back, hopefully with everything all shredded and ready to go. Okay, so I finished shredding up the other half of the cabbage, and this I was letting sit in here just with the salt. I didn't do anything to it, and it honestly has shrunk down to about half of the crock itself. Because it wasn't full, but it was pretty close to the top. And with all that moisture getting pulled out of those leaves, it has really shriveled down. So it's really impressive. Now before I go ahead and add the rest of my cabbage in, I want to start mashing. This will allow for more liquid to get pulled out of the cabbage. And you don't have to do anything super crazy when it comes to mashing, you know, just constant, just a little hammering here and there, like all around. And you'll start to see, and even hear, all that liquid getting pulled out. So just little smashes. And you don't have to do this for long periods of time. You can do it for a couple minutes, take a break, come back, a couple minutes, you know, smash again, take a break. Because the more time that you allow this to sit out, that salt will be able to really work to its fullest potential and pull all the liquid out. This is just kind of helping it do it a little bit faster. And this is really nice if you had extra little hands in the kitchen. Give them a little masher and tell them to go to town. Okay, so I think I smashed this good enough for now. I'm going to grab just a little spatula or whatever and give this a little stir. I want to take a peek, see how much liquid's in here. It sounds like there's a lot. It was really sloshing around. And it helps to kind of stir it, you know, mix that salt in a little bit more. And now, since we've let it sit, let the salt do most of the work, and then we've mashed it, honestly, it's down to probably a quarter. So I could most likely fit the rest of this cabbage in, and it'll be perfectly fine. Because I first put it in, it was nearly full, let the salt sit, and it shrunk down to half full, and now, after mashing, it's probably about a quarter full. So it's really exciting to see. So now what I'm going to do is sprinkle a little more in here, a little more cabbage. Just add about half the bowl here. And then I'm going to take some more salt, since we already did 2 tablespoons, and this was a 4-pound cabbage, a tablespoon per pound, we need 2 more tablespoons left. So, and obviously they don't have to be precise. You know, if you have a mounding tablespoon, that's totally fine. But yes, you want to kind of mix it in. If you don't want to get your hands in there, you can use a spoon. It's totally fine. But that way, you get the salt in there and it has contact to almost all the leaves. And it gets all that moisture out. Because that's our brine. Next, I'm going to throw the rest of this in here. It should all fit snugly. And we know it'll shrink down even more, so we'll have plenty of room. Okay, now for the last bit, the last tablespoon. I might add a smidgen more just because I want to. But that just shows it's not like a total, like there's science to this, the fermentation and everything, but it's not like baking where you gotta follow it exactly like a science, you know. If you need a little extra salt, so be it. If you need a little less, that's fine. It's totally up to you, your preference. You just want to make sure that your cabbage is under the liquid once you begin fermenting it. And if for some reason, say we let this sit for like 10 minutes, come back, mash it a bunch of times, and it just looks like that's all the liquid that's coming out of these leaves, you can make a brine to add to this to make sure that everything is covered. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the video. But for now, since I have all the salt here mixed in nicely, nice and massaged, you can sit here and kind of work it for like a minute or so, really get it in there. But now that I have this all mixed nicely, I feel like, I'm just going to let it sit for about 5-10 minutes, maybe 20, whatever. You can kind of forget about it if you wanted, just not too long. But I'm going to let that salt work its magic. So I'm just going to set it off to the side, kind of clean up my little area a little bit here, and then we will come back and start mashing again. Okay, so I've let this sit for about 5-10 minutes or so. It has really shrunk down really nicely. It was filled pretty much all the way to the top. It's probably went down about a quarter, about a fourth, so very nicely. So next step is to mash away. Okay, I have been smashing for a couple minutes now, and I've got a good amount of liquid in here, and to where it's starting to splash me. So I'm gonna take my little spatula, kind of stir everything a little bit, and then I'll probably let it rest again, maybe another 5 minutes, just whatever salt that hasn't worked fully, let it finish off. And then I'll kind of come back and mash again. That way, hopefully we'll have enough liquid to cover all like cabbage in here. Okay, so like I said, I'm just gonna kind of let this sit. I'll come back, mash it maybe 1 or 2 more times, and then we will see how much liquid we have after that. So I will be right back. Okay, so I only had to come back and mash it 1 more time, and I feel like we got a good enough amount of liquid to where when I put the weight on top, it'll fully submerge everything. So, first things first, I want to show you guys how much liquid is on here, or in here, and covering everything. That way you kind of have an idea of what to look for as far as whether it's ready or if there's enough liquid or not. So, let me grab the camera and I'll show you guys. Once we add the weight, it'll definitely submerge everything nicely. But you could see all that liquid just from the cabbage leaves. Okay, so the next part is to weigh everything down. Now, with this cabbage, I didn't have any good looking outer leaves, so I didn't save any of them. Typically though, if you do have a decent sized leaf that isn't too beat up or has too many holes in it or anything like that, what you can do is use that as like a nice overall cover, and then you can place a weight on top of those leaves. That way it pushes everything down at once versus little pieces here, little pieces there, you know? So that's why I recommend saving some leaves in the beginning and have them off to the side. I unfortunately don't have any, so I have to get a little creative. Especially with a vessel this big. I don't have any crock weights. I know they sell different size crock weights to go over any set type of ferments and stuff for your crocks. I don't have any, unfortunately. And I do have, they're called pickle pebbles. It's like a glass weight for like a large mason jar, or they even have regular sized ones for the regular mouth. But I'll use those for when I have a smaller fermentation batch. But for something like this, I have a couple of glass plates and a Pyrex lid. So this plate should fit in here enough to keep, it'll act as my cabbage leaf. It'll just kind of cover everything, you know, with that surface area, and then hopefully this will be my weight. We'll see how it works, and it'll keep everything submerged. So I'm gonna see how this works. Fingers crossed here. I think it'll do best. My plate's like this, I think. You obviously want to make sure your utensils are clean, and I did make sure my stuff is clean. And what I'm doing is I am just pushing my plate down, and I'm getting some of the liquid in it, and I don't know if that's proper, because I don't want to take away from the cabbage. Maybe if I try it the other way. This is all trial and error, everyone. At least this part is. This is always the fun part. Okay. Just Gonna push it down, get all those air bubbles out. So I flipped my plate over, so my plate is upside down. And because it is a little convexed, I am going to, or is that, yeah, convexed, that I'm going to try and push that liquid over the plate and get those air bubbles out from that little pocket without trying to get the sauerkraut on top of the plate. So it's kind of a process, but it honestly looks like it's holding out pretty good. Liquid's on top. I almost think I don't need this lid. I feel like I've created like a vacuum or suction. I don't know, but I'm going to show you guys this, and then I'm going to discuss what you can do if you don't have enough liquid. Because I know I mentioned that earlier, but let me show you where I'm at now. Okay, so here is my plate. Like I said, I put it upside down, and what I did was I just pushed on it so all the air can kind of escape. And this liquid is over it. And I'll probably just skim the little pieces of cabbage off the top there. That way I don't have any chance of molding. But that's what we're working with. You want to make sure everything is under that brine. That weight is there. And I pushed the air out so no air is underneath and cause any molding under that plate as well. So that's a big thing to consider as well. Okay, so if you have mashed all you possibly can, you've added the appropriate amount of salt that you think that you need, and you've massaged it, all your cabbage and stuff, and you just still don't have enough liquid to cover everything, you can make your own brine. You just need to add, and this is just primarily for additional brine. You typically don't want to make this brine right off the get-go. Sauerkraut particularly likes to have a 2% brine, which is about 9 grams of salt per cup of water. And then you just add as much as you need to make sure everything is covered. Then throw your weight on it. Make sure that liquid's over your weight just for extra security, and you're good to go. And that's what we're gonna do now, is just set this off to the side. I'm gonna probably bring it upstairs, have it sit on my countertop. I don't want to put it in the fridge or anything, because anything, I think it's below 55 degrees or so. Don't quote me on that, please don't. But if you have it too cold, it will slow down your fermentation process, and it could potentially take longer. Now, if your kitchen is very, very hot, it could speed up your fermentation process. So it could vary depending on your kitchen, but typically just keep this on the counter, maybe off to the side. Got a little table in the corner somewhere, that's totally fine. I do want to recommend, though, taking like a cheesecloth or a clean lint-free dish towel and having it over your crock. That way no dust gets in, no bugs or anything like that, and it keeps it, you know, essentially protected from any dirt or debris, because that can also cause molding. And speaking of molding, I want to stress that every day or so, check your ferment. You'll see maybe after the second or third day, you'll start seeing some bubbles come up. That's the process of it releasing those lactoferment gases. And it could cause like a scuzzy or fuzzy film on the top. That's that I think it's con yeast it's called. And nothing bad, nothing major, and you know, make sure you check it every day or so. That way you can skim the top of all that yeast and get rid of that, because if you let that sit, that can also mold, and that can just ruin your ferment altogether. So make sure your stuff is covered in the liquid. Make sure you check daily to make sure no yeast is forming and no mold is forming. And then typically I like to let my kraut sit for about a month, maybe a month and a week. About that month mark, I will take a fork and I will taste it. And if it tastes good to me, that's how I know it's ready. And if you think your ferment has gone bad, take a good sniff. I'm serious. Smell your ferment, because your nose knows. If it smells really bad, like rotten bad, like you're going to throw up bad, you know it's bad. But if it just smells a little sour or a little funny, That's most likely just the way your ferment is supposed to be. I mean, it's called sauerkraut. It's going to have that tang to it. So as long as you like what it tastes like at that moment, then that's how you know it is ready. So that is pretty much it as far as making sauerkraut and, in a nutshell, how to ferment a lot of food. Everything is a little bit different as far as percentages go, but this is basically a little crash course in it. Super easy, really not that time consuming or labor intensive. I mean, especially if you have a food processor, that really helps speed things up. But more or less, now we just have to wait. So like I said, in about a month or so, I mean, throughout the time period, I'm going to check on it, keep my eyes on it, skim the top. But in about a month, I'm going to test it, taste test it, and if I think it's ready to go, I'm going to can it up, put it on the shelf. So that is pretty much it as far as making sauerkraut. I hope you guys really enjoyed. I really hope you guys give this a whirl because it is definitely so much better than buying store-bought and so much cheaper. Honestly, just think, how much did a packet of seeds cost for cabbage? You grow a couple of those seeds, you get a nice big head, you make a big batch of cabbage, and you can have up to, I don't know, 5 to 10 jars per cabbage, depending on how large, you know, of sauerkraut, and saves you a lot of money than going to the store every week or every month or what have you. So if you're big on sauerkraut, definitely make your own. But anyway, I hope you guys like this video. Please leave me a comment if you guys have fermented different varieties of sauerkraut. I know you can kind of add a couple extra things in there. Let me know. I'd be really interested in hearing about it, possibly even trying it. And don't forget to subscribe so don't miss out on any other fun little preservation station homestead projects we have here. Alrighty guys, thank you for watching. Bye.